Joe Biden's trying to bounce back after what he calls a gut punch from what appears to be a fourth-place finish in the Iowa caucuses. So what's next for the candidate as he heads into New Hampshire? NBC's Vaughn Hillyard is in New Hampshire. And Vaughn, let's start it off with a countdown. How many days do we have?
How many days to, hold on, I'm looking at producer Matt Wargo. He tells me 5 days to the New Hampshire primary.
Do we trust him?
Sorry, I'm still going back in negative days from the Iowa caucus. That's where my mind is still at. Because that's literally the phone conversations that I'm still having.
Crazy, right?
In New Hampshire, Allison, in Merrimack, New Hampshire here, of course, ahead of the primary. Pete Buttigieg is currently inside of this American Legion Hall, having a conversation with veterans and several folks. It's kind of a small hall. Several dozen folks were turned away. But hey, this is the part of the primary process where it's just a dash to the finish line. You know, he was up in New York just early this morning on The View before flying here into New Hampshire to hold this event here this afternoon, Allison.
Vaughn, Biden called out a couple of his Democratic opponents. I'd like to play what he said about Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
He calls himself a democratic socialist. Donald Trump is desperate to pin the socialist label of socialist on our party. We can't let him do that. Mayor Pete likes to attack me as well. I have great respect for Mayor Pete and his service to this nation. But I do believe it's a risk, to be just straight up with you, for this party to nominate someone who's never held an office higher than mayor of a town of 100,000 people in Indiana.
Should we expect more of this from Biden as the campaign heats up?
Joe Biden has to turn this campaign around now. This is a fourth-place finish in Iowa is not what the former vice president had in mind. Just look at over the course of the year, it was Joe Biden who was suggesting that he was the best position to beat Donald Trump, saying that he would beat him like a drum, and that no matter what Donald Trump threw his way or any Democrat threw his way, nothing knocked him down. But then suddenly Monday rolled around, and whether it's Pete Buttigieg or Bernie Sanders who ultimately come out on top, Joe Biden is not in the top three coming out of Iowa. This is a candidate who needs to turn it around, because if you look here in New Hampshire, it's a very similar state to Iowa in a lot of ways. New Hampshire went for Hillary Clinton, Allison, by less than 3,000 points. So New Hampshire folks have a very keen eye on picking somebody who could beat Donald Trump here in the state. And Pete Buttigieg is very much taking that same message that he had in Iowa about bringing in independents and Republicans and using that here in New Hampshire. He's had 9 events over the course of the last 2 days, this being his 10th, and he'll be in the state here through the primary. For Joe Biden, he has looked at South Carolina as his firewall, but we should note, that's now more than 2 weeks away still, that South Carolina primary. And in the meanwhile, Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg, they're raising money. The Buttigieg campaign announcing they just pulled in $2.73 million since the Iowa caucus night, and they're going to be able to use those resources to go up with advertisements in places like South Carolina and really expand the message that they are the two leaders here in this primary process right now.
Vaughn, so much going on this week. It's hard to believe that we have a debate on Friday. Friday's tomorrow. I'm sitting here doing the math like you were before, because this week just feels like a blur. What should we be watching for there? I think a lot of people forgot that was coming. We might not even be done with the Iowa caucuses by Friday.
I'm looking at Matt again. Where's the debate? I think it's in Manchester.
Who knows? Just kidding.
Yeah, we're going hour by hour here, Allison. I think you're right. The debate is tomorrow. This is huge. I mean, in terms of trying to message, what you just heard yesterday from the former vice president is a very direct message. You heard those comments about Pete Buttigieg, calling it a, quote, risk to pick the former South Bend mayor. But then also went on the attack against Bernie Sanders, saying the Democrats cannot afford to nominate somebody who the Trump campaign will smear as a socialist, saying that is not what the Democratic Party should turn to at such a moment as this. And so you see, I don't know if you'll call it a flustered, but you'll call it a candidate who is very much understands the position that he now finds himself in. And he is going to be throwing up pretty much everything he can, because a fourth place finish out of Iowa is rough. Anything less than, I think, a second place here in New Hampshire is cause for concern, because then soon poll numbers out of South Carolina will begin to come out. And if those numbers are not as good as they've been, that's when you're going to be hearing more pressure from the likes of folks particularly likely the Buttigieg campaign, who will be calling for the former vice president to back out because there is one other candidate still waiting in the wings, and that would be Michael Bloomberg,
who
has already spent a heck of a lot of money on this race here, and he's waiting to go mano a mano with somebody like a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren himself.
Vaughn, you say anything less than a second-place finish for Biden is problematic. A new Monmouth poll out today shows him in third place in New Hampshire, behind Bernie, behind Pete. What do you make of that? I mean, how concerning is that with just, as you said, 5 days to go till New Hampshire goes to the polls?
You know, so much of how the primary process works is momentum. In terms of folks believing who can win, and what have we constantly heard, and we have said every week since this election started, was that Democrats are looking for somebody who can win. That's what we heard in Iowa. That's what we heard in New Hampshire. And now Pete Buttigieg can say, look, I won. Either whether he technically will have won or not, he's making the case that he won the Iowa caucus here and that he is positioned to beat Donald Trump. And Iowa and New Hampshire are two places the Democrats would like to make a play. So if folks in these later states start to lose faith that Joe Biden is the most electable figure in this race, that becomes a really tough situation for him to overcome. That pull out of New Hampshire is critical, and I don't think that it's any coincidence that you heard him in Somersworth just yesterday afternoon light the rest of this Democratic field up, because it's go time for Joe Biden. He's got to turn the ship around now.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.